Shalom. Before I start, I want to give our honors and glories and praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Wakar Kodash, Yahweh, which is the one true name of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, but his one true name is Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, meaning coming in the name, Ba means coming in, Ha means the, Shah means name, Rakah means spirit, Kodash means holy. Peace, blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect, and shalom to you, sincere brothers that are scattered abroad, pushing forth this word in truth and sincerity. And shalom to you, sincere sisters that are listening in silence, as the scriptures command you to do so. I am the brother Mashiach Arazakah, and pretty much this lesson is going to be titled as The Woman at the Well Was Not an Israelite. She was a heathen. Okay, the woman at the well was not an Israelite. She was a heathen. Now, you got other Israelite groups. They teach that the Samaritan woman that was at the well was an Israelite. But she was a heathen, though. She wasn't an Israelite. Okay, so that's what we're going to prove in this lesson. Because when they read John 4 and 22, right, they assume that the woman at the well was an Israelite. And she wasn't. She was a heathen. So, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. We're going to go to John chapter 4. We're going to read down to verse 22. And we also going to add precepts as we go down, breaking this down to the spirit, for those of you that's new in the truth. So hopefully, Lord willing, this can be edifying to you. So the woman that was at the well, she was literally a heathen. She was not an Israelite. All right, and we're gonna get that right now and prove this in this lesson. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. This is St. John chapter 4, verse 1. It says when therefore the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Yahushua made and baptized more disciples than John. Verse 2, though Yahushua himself baptized not, but his disciples. Verse 3, it says he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. Verse 4, and it says he must needs go through Samaria. Verse 5, and it says then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. All right, so Samaria is in the land of Israel. Okay, Israel are the ones that dwell in that land. Okay, Samaria is in Israel. And actually, I'll get a map, and then we'll go back to that, because I want to show you on this map, because, it's easy to say Samaria, and you might not know where Samaria is located at. So, let's get that really quick, all right, on the map, so you can see where Samaria is, all right? So, as you can see on this map, that's Samaria. Okay, Samaria is in Israel. All right. Samaria is in Israel, as you can see. You see where it says Samaria? Well, it doesn't say Samaria there, but this is Samaria. Okay, Samaria is in Israel. For those of you that are new. All right, that's where Samaria is located. All right, and Samaria is in the land of Israel. Israelites are the ones that dwell in Samaria. But you also got a mixture of heathens there. Okay? You also got a mixture of heathens there. But let's keep reading. This is John 4 and 6. It says, now Jacob's well was there. Yahushua, therefore, being worried with his journey, set thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. Now, this is when it's going to go into the Samaritan woman. All right, so at this point right here, it's going to mention the Samaritan woman here. Okay, this is when the Lord went to the well, right? Verse 7, it says, there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. It says, Yahushua said unto her, give me to drink. Okay, so this woman was a heathen, basically. She wasn't an Israelite. At this point, you had Israel and you had heathen nations dwelling in Samaria all together, mixed, because you did. That's why when you go to Matthew chapter 10, and you read read verse 5 on down to 7, right? Matthew 10 and 5 says, go not into the way of the Gentiles, enter any city of Samaritans, enter ye not, because you had heathens there as well. You had heathens that was in Samaria, right? There was heathens dwelling in Samaria during that time. Okay? So this is how we know for certain that the Samaritan woman was a heathen. Okay, because she's going to make a point in verse 9. Okay, she's going to make her point in verse 9. But let's keep reading, verse 8. And it says, for his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Verse 9. This is how we know that she for certain was a heathen. Because watch what she say. Right? Verse 9. This is John 4:9. It says, then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, ask to drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dwellings with the Samaritans. So she was a heathen. That's how we know she was a heathen, because the statement she made. She was a heathen. Right? What she clearly said right there basically let you know that this woman, right, that Samaritan woman, wasn't an Israelite. She was a heathen. She even stated, she said the Jews had no dwellings with the Samaritans. All right. So the Samaritans was basically heathen nations who weren't Israelites. All right. And this is the reason why she asked the Messiah this question here. So this is how we know for certain that she was a heathen. She wasn't an Israelite. All right. She was a heathen because of that statement. Let's read again. John 4:9. It says, then said the woman of Samaria unto him, how is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dwellings with the Samaritans. So she's clearly telling you she a heathen. She not an Israelite, right? She wasn't an Israelite. With that statement there, we know that she was a heathen. For certain, she was a heathen. Verse 10, it says, Yahushua answered and said unto her, if thou knowest the gift of the Most High, who is it that saith to thee, give me to drink? Thou shouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. Right? Verse 11. And it says, the woman saith unto him, sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and we well is deep. It says, and the well is deep, Salakia. From whence then hast thou that living water? Right? Verse 12. It says, art thou greater than our father Jacob, which giveth us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? Right? Now the heathens were brought into the land, right? They weren't keeping any laws. They were brought to the land, but they weren't keeping any laws, right? The heathens, they were brought to the land, right? They were brought into the land. They weren't keeping any laws, all right? They weren't. Verse 13, it says, Yahushua answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. Right? Verse 14, but whosoever drinketh the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Right? Which is the spirit of Yahweh Shemashai. That's what that's talking about. That's what the Lord was meaning, which is the spirit of Yahweh Shemashai, right? That's that everlasting, right? That water, right? That's springing up. It says, but the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life, right? Which is the spirit of Yahweh Shemashai. That's what that's talking about, all right? That's exactly what that's talking about. John 4:15. It says, the woman saith unto him, sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Verse 16. And it says, Yahushua answered unto her, and Yahushua saith unto her, go call thy husband and come hither. Verse 17. And it says, the woman answered and said, I have no husband. Right? Yahushua said unto her, thou hast well said, I have no husband. Verse 18. And it says, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou hast is not thy hand. Right? It's not thy hand. It says it's not thy hand. Salakia. It's like it's not thy husband. Salakia. I read from the top. It says, for thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou hast, it says whom thou now hast is not thy husband. Right? In that saidest thou truly. Verse 19, and it says, the woman saith unto him, sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Verse 20, our fathers worshipped in his mountain, And ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Because this is when Yahushua is going to be blunt with her right here, but we're going to get some precepts to back this part up, because this is the main point, right? Verse 21. It says, Yahushua said unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Verse 22. It says, Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. That solves it right there. Because the woman don't know what she worships. She don't know what she worships. Right? So that proves it right there. She don't know what she worships. All right. Yes, the heathens know of Yahweh Shemashai, right? Of the mighty work that the Lord did, right, in bringing our people out of Egypt. But the heathen don't know of Yahweh Shemashai like Israel do. They know of him, of the works he's done in in the captivity of us being in Egypt, right? But they don't literally know of Yahweh Shemashai like Israel do. They don't. All right. And we got some precepts to back this up. This is Amos 3:1. Amos 3:1, right? And it says, Hear this word that the Lord have spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, verse 2, You only have I known of all the families of the earth, therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. So what was the Lord talking about? What was the Lord talking about, right? What was the Lord talking about? Let's find out, right? Get some precepts. This is Psalms 147 and verse 19. You see that? So this is how we know for certain that the woman at the well, she was a heathen. Psalms 147:19. It says, He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. You see that? Verse 20. It says, He have not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier. Now the heathen, they may know of Yahweh Shemashai, of the works he may have performed during the time of our captivity being delivered from Egypt, right? The plagues that the Lord put upon Egypt. But they don't know of Yahweh Shemashai like Israel does, like we know our Lord. Okay? So let's read verse 20 again. It says, He have not dealt so with any nation. As for his judgments, ye have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. So us knowing Yahweh Shemashai in that manner, it's us getting the last commandments and the statutes of Yahweh Shemashai. So when Yahushua told this woman this, right, that's what Yahushua was making reference to. Okay? So that's what the Lord was talking about. That's what he was making reference to. All right? Ye know not what you worship, but we know what we worship, right? That's what the Lord was saying, right? She wasn't an Israelite. That's why he told her that. He said, Ye know not what, but we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews, right? Because she didn't know what she was worship. She didn't know what she worshiped, right? She wasn't an Israelite, right? She did not know what she worshiped, but we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. So that's why the Lord said that unto her. So going back to John, right? John 4:22. So that's what the Lord was talking about. That's what he was making reference to. John 4:22. We wrap this up. It says, Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews, because we know Yahweh Shemashai. We know of our power. We know of Yahweh Shemashai. So again, that woman that was at the well, she was a heathen. She wasn't an Israelite. And that's why the Lord said that unto her. Okay? Because she was a heathen. She was not an Israelite. And again, how we specifically know that she was a heathen, because the statement she made in John 4:9. She made that statement there. So that's how we know for certain that she was not an Israelite. She was a heathen. So wait, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. On to the next one. Shalom.